Hi. So here we are, next to last video, and I'm going to be taking you through our other method of comparison and contrast organization. I'm going to be talking to you about the sequencing method. So for this demonstration, I'm going to use the same two subjects that we used in the previous video where we were going through the chunking method. Because the reason I want to use the same topics is to show you how you can apply the same subjects to the two different methods. All right, so how does the sequencing method differ from the chunking method of organization? We're still going to be comparing and contrasting our same two cities, New York and Los Angeles. So here is the major difference. If we look at a sequencing outline, and I do apologize, the writing's a little small there. I probably should have made that larger, but note the difference in how the essay is structured. Okay, so instead of going through all of the points about New York and then moving to Los Angeles, we're actually taking the essay point by point. This is why this method is also sometimes called the point by point method of organization. So depending on who you're talking to, what textbook you're reading, etc., you might hear different names for this method. But again, I tend to stick with the label that I've become familiar with through teaching over the years. But anyway, so we're going to call this the sequencing outline. And so here we're going to divide it up by our planned points of discussion. So remember, the first one was weather. We talked about the weather in New York versus the weather in Los Angeles. All right, so that's what that's going to look like in this outline. So we're going to start with point 1, which is weather. We're going to move to point 2. We're going to talk about the people in both cities. We're going to talk about transportation. That's going to be our third point. And we're going to talk about arts and entertainment. That'll be our fourth point of discussion. So once we get past the introduction, the first body paragraph of our essay, if we're using sequencing, might look something like this. So I'm just going to read it to you, and then we'll go back and break it down. New York, America's largest city, is also a city of contrasts. In the summer, temperatures can soar into the muggy 90s, while in the winter, blizzards and sub-freezing temperatures can be expected. If you go to New York in the winter, pack plenty of wool sweaters and scarves because you need them. For this reason, some tourists may prefer Los Angeles, where the sun always shines and snow is a rarity. Even in January, a typical day in Los Angeles may top out at 80 degrees. Additionally, its summers are not as humid as on the East Coast. Okay, so again, breaking down this paragraph, we start with subject A. We're going to talk a little bit about weather conditions there, how you prepare, how you need to dress, etc. But note what happens here. Within the same paragraph, we've got this transitional sentence, right? Which is, for this reason, some tourists may prefer Los Angeles. That right there is our cue, right? That we're shifting gears, and we're going to talk about weather in Los Angeles. Note that this all occurs in the same paragraph. So that's the big difference between the way these two methods structure the discussion, right? Because if you think back to chunking, we would have gone through 3 or 4 discussion points about New York, everything, not just the weather, but the people, the transportation, the arts, etc. We would have gone through all of that before even mentioning Los Angeles. So the fact that we've already brought Los Angeles into the discussion cues us that this is the sequencing method. All right, let's look at our next body paragraph. So transportation, and again, sequencing method. On a typical street in New York, one is apt to get run over if they can't keep up with the crowds on the sidewalk. In New York, everyone walks, and standing still can get you trampled. Most residents in the heart of the city do not drive their own cars downtown. Instead, you will see the streets congested with taxis and buses. That's because most everyone relies on public commuting services to get around. This is a far cry from Los Angeles, where driving your open convertible down its palm-studded boulevards is an expected rite of passage. All right, I'm going to stop it right there, because the important thing here is what we want to establish is we've gone through all of our discussion of what transportation is like in New York. Then we have a transitional sentence, a transitional phrase, if you will. Sometimes it can be a phrase or it can be a full sentence. This is a far cry from Los Angeles, where driving your open convertible down its palm-studded boulevards is an expected rite of passage. So what is that sentence doing? It's simply, again, cueing the reader that that transition is coming. Okay, bear with me just a second here. So that essentially is the difference between the two methods. So with chunking, you're simply discussing all of subject A before you move to subject B, whereas using the sequencing method, you're staggering by your points rather than by subject A and subject B. So you're going to be discussing both subjects interchangeably throughout the entire essay. And again, briefly, when to use which, well, that's up to you, but keep these points in mind. Chunking is going to work especially well for limited subjects and comparisons. If, let's say, for example, only 2 topics are being compared. If you're doing like a before and after type comparison, again, chunking works really well for that. This particular example, we were only using 2 subjects, New York and Los Angeles, so therefore chunking or sequencing works equally well for both. Sequencing, of course, is better suited for comparing multiple subjects. Let's say, again, you've got an essay where maybe you want to compare 6 things, 7 things. I would hope it wouldn't go much beyond that, because then it's going to get pretty unwieldy. But, basically anytime we get above 2 to 3 subjects, sequencing actually works better because it helps you keep the organization staggered, and it keeps the reader from getting too confused. They don't have to backtrack and try to figure out which point you're referring back to. So sequencing is better suited for comparing multiple subjects or comparisons where several points will be introduced. And of course, it's preferable for any situation where staggering the points of comparison is desired, because maybe your focal point is those discussion points. Okay, so let's say in in an essay on New York and Los Angeles, you want to keep that focused on transportation, weather, what the people are like, what the arts and entertainment scene is like, and you want to make that your focal point rather than a separate discussion of each city. So those are the times when it would make sense to use the sequencing method. All right, the next video is going to show you some sample outlines of both methods, and that should be, yeah, that's going to be the next step in your sequence for this module.